everybody. Today I'm going to share my experience of the experience in my learning and how it cultivates self-awareness and allowing me to keeping on my own pace. So this is the flow of my presentation. So first of all, let me briefly introduce myself. I'm a psychology year 4 student, and my hobby is watching some movies and also do some video making and editing and doing some simple psychology and personality tests on different platforms. And I like traveling and also drinking. But however, I'm somehow a little bit lost in my future pathway that I'm interested in many kind of things, but none of them are I'm actually good at or specialized in it. So I was always thinking about what is my strength and weakness. So self-awareness is the ability to focus on yourself and how your actions, thoughts, and emotions do or don't align with your internal standard. So Laura has broke self-awareness into 5 dimensions. And first of all, the mind chatters, and which there's the thoughts in our mind that never stops and repeat themselves. And also the healthy boundaries that we synchronize inner belief to outer experience. And unconditional love, and which that we self-aware that we all deserve love, and show some self-compassion to myself, and also self-exploration that I spend time exploring different fields to explore my strength and weakness, and finally the immersion in the present, which that we practice mindfulness. So there's some importance of self-awareness in personal development, and first of all, it is the most important component in emotion intelligence, and also it is the starting point of self-improvement, and also it helps to build a better relationship with others. So before the experience, this is how I perceive myself, and there's 2 parts, which is the internal self-awareness. That for the emotional part, the main emotion that conquered me is anxiety, which I always think about and worry about the future. And also for the cognitive process, actually I'm not very aware of how my thoughts is doing in my mind. And also for the personal belief and goal, it is kind of ambiguous. And for the strength of weakness, it is not a there's not a very clear interpretation of my strength and weakness. And also my personality traits, I think that I'm talkative and friendly, but highly agreeable, a little bit introvert. And for the external self-awareness is that how people sees me, and the people sees me as talkative and but highly agreeable in a kind of negative way, and lack of self-discipline. So before the experience is that I'm not a very self-aware person, and I'm a kind of future-oriented person rather than living in the present. So I'm going to share my experience, 2 experiences in my Cape Town study tour, which is provided by EDU Hong Kong. So in the previous summer, I have joined this study tour, and the reason why I applied for this study tour is that I think it is a very precious and rare chance, and it is my final year, so I would like to try on something new, and I love nature, and I have never been to somewhere out of Asia. So the first experience is that to bonding with the locals, and because our guide at the beginning of the trip, he told us that he had been educating and reminding us that the crimes in Cape Town is still prevalent, and we have to keep an eye on our circumstance. And me and my groupmate felt the need to distance ourselves from the natives, the locals, and also bond with the other students. But until there's Carl Parker one day came by and started to talk to our group, and he was trying to share his life experience as a former prisoner and how he changed it into a better person. But however, there's some reaction difference between me and my groupmates, which provoked my reflection. And for my groupmates, they immediately raised the alertness and stayed away from him. And they told me to leave and said I'm too stubborn, and that they are more cautious and think that the car parker may want something more from us, like some tips, and also he might have made up the story. But however, for me, is that I want to stay and listen to his story, and I have the belief of holding a non-judgmental attitude towards anybody, and I feel like it is a precious opportunity for me to communicate with the locals. So I have been reflecting on why I'm reacting different with other people, and that I found out the process of reflection have enhanced my self-awareness. Is that firstly, for the theory of mine, I started to begin to realize the happiness of listening to all walks of life, and I have recognized my emotions and have developed my affective theory of mine, and hence I started to break out of the shell of the comfort zone and started to have more conversation with the people there and with different cultural backgrounds, and whenever it is safe and possible in the trip. And after experiencing myself, I gained more insight about myself. I found that I am open-minded and I have the strength to listen to people's story, and I can learn my personal belief and values of holding non-judgmental attitudes. So holding the personal belief, I continue my self-exploration, and that I behave accordingly to my personal belief. And finally, I have more positive efforts and better acquisition of self and the world. And for the experience too, is that there's the 3 days hike in the Cape Town study tour, and we are required to climb 3 famous mountains in Cape Town. First of all, the Table Mountain and the Lion's Head, and also the Cape of Good Hope. And the 3 days hike and climbing were extremely challenging for me. Is that they required lots of energy, and I'm fear of the height, and I'm a bit anxious. So in the experience, I have recognized that my thinking style. And firstly, before the hike, I wasn't sure about my thinking style, but during the hike, I found that I was afraid of fainting and falling off from the mountain, and which has caused my anxiety. And the anxiety has increased my physiological arousal, which that I started to sweating and also decrease in mobility. And after my first day of hiking, I started to discuss with my peers of how to reduce my anxiety when facing challenge, and they remind me that I might have a relatively negative thinking style. And I found that when I objectively reflecting on my thinking style, is that I have adopted in the thinking pattern of fortune telling, and during the hiking, I projected some negative efforts into the future, that I imagined myself fainted or I fell off from the mountain, and which has created a self-fulfilling prophecy where my negative vision of the future is so strong that it impacts the ability, it impacts my ability to behave in the way. And after recognizing my thinking style, I attempt to reconstruct my mindset by thinking less about what is the negative outcome, and finally it reduced my anxiety and have improved my problem-solving skills. And in the hiking, it's also enabled me to practice some self-compassion, and because I found myself unable to keep up the pace with my group mates, and I was being discouraged, and I started to judge myself. And until my teacher from the back while hiking had told me to keep on my own pace, and he told me that you improve every time you try. And this has been raised my awareness of self-compassion, is that I found myself having the pattern of harsh self-criticism, and I have a lack of unconditional love and self-aware of all of that we all deserve love. And I started to begin to acknowledge my strength and weakness and shift the attention back to myself. And I started to gain better understanding and sense of control of myself, and which reduced my anxiety. So attempting to show more encouragement and compassion to myself have reduced my anxiety and gained the locus of control. And the experience at U Hong Kong is that I found that it is very important of staying alone and having some me times for self-awareness development. So my experience is living in the hall, and luckily I have been succeed enrollment in the hall since senior year entry, so I have been living in hall for also a bit of time. And that's before the hall, I feel like I easily can feel anxious, that I'm afraid of being alone. So I feel the urge and need to bond with the peers and always be in a group. And by living in the hall, I wanted to train my social interaction skills. But however, I started to do everything with the group and become dependent, lost track of personal growth, and also I started to have excessive care of the opinions from the group, and which turns out I have started to decrease in my problem-solving skills and social interaction skills. So I have discussed with my peers about why am I having this change, and I feel like there's something wrong with me. And then she told me that I should schedule some alone time, and I started to reflect on what is loneliness and what is solitude. And I found that solitude is that you can stay alone, but not necessarily feeling lonely. So I can start to have some actions, like I schedule for myself during the school day. I plan a day off and have some meditation and have some nature walk by myself. And I found that the actions and the discussions have and I increased the time of my me time, have increased my time to self-reflect and exploration of my thoughts and emotions. And it also increased my different aspects like creativity, problem solving, because I'm more independent now, and then I can recharge myself and also improve the social interaction skills by develop more positive efforts when communicating with others. So after the experience, I found that the perceived self has a little bit slightly changed. So from I'm being future oriented to now I'm started to have presence, more focus in the presence, and also I can objectively observe the emotions, which have improved my critical thinking skills. And also for the cognitive process, I recognize my negative thinking pattern, and that I learned to reconstruct my mindset and used the mindset to improve my problem-solving skills. And also for the personal belief, I found myself having non-judgmental attitude, and I found the need of exploring the world, and I like to listen to others' stories. And also the strength and weakness, I found myself open-minded, but have a relatively negative cognitive style. So for the external self-awareness part from before, I started to accept feedback from others for more self-improvement. So for my future goals, I started to think about how self-awareness can facilitate my further development. So for my short-term goals, I will continue to have some self-exploration by participating in more activities and discover my potentials. And for the long-term goals is that I found myself interested in listening to all walks of life, and I found that connecting myself to the world, I can utilize the self-awareness in the context of counseling. So how I can objectively aware of people's emotions, thoughts, and feelings, like what I can do now, which can facilitate the communication and gain better understanding of the needs of different clients and people. So I'm sure that by enhancing self-awareness, I could define who I am, but not the world. So thank you so much.